since we've been studying how to become real-life superheroes, how do the characters that we create affect how people behave in real life? So how does film affect what we become? And so therefore, what is the responsibility of the filmmaker when it comes to the influence on society, and then ultimately creating real-life superheroes? I'm really excited to have another awesome guest for you today. My friend, actually, and a film producer. I appreciate Samantha Monty Aiken.
Hi, yeah, my name is Samantha Monty Aiken. I am a filmmaker and marketer, creative.
So Samantha just finished up her major feature film post-production right now. I'm Having an Affair with My Wife, which is a romantic comedy about a married couple who discovers that they're fed up with marriage to each other and then decide to have affairs online, but then the affair service matches them up to each other. We've talked a lot over the past years, since about 2017, working on this film about things like the importance of representation in media, and other things like that at the website mysweetaffair.com. So you've been on a lot of different film sets. I know you worked on one of the Fast and Furiouses. You've gone from doing extra things to studying like DP things. You've got your fingers into editing and all different kinds of work. Like different like corporate marketing and things like that for companies and things like that. And you've done making documentary films for charities and other kinds of things, just a little bit of everything. What got you into the idea of telling a story via the visual medium in the first place?
So, I mean, the visual medium is how most of the world interacts with story. And I think there's just no better way, especially now, to tell stories and to tell a brand story or your personal stories. I mean, people are looking, especially with the pandemic last year, a lot of people were looking for, content to engage with people in ways that they weren't able to face-to-face. And I think that's really what I try to bring to the table as far as projects I try to get involved with. I'm looking for things that I feel enriched having known about and I want to tell people about.
Absolutely. One of the things that kind of brings up is, as you're looking for things like personal enrichment, what does personally enrich you? Like, what kind of things have you seen that make you kind of want to be better or want to like impact how you live your life? And how has that influenced how you want to influence through film?
So I like to connect with my fellow human, I've always been sort of exposed to a lot of different people's experiences and always like to learn about them. I'm an introvert, but, I care about, the struggles of, the common man. And I like being able to sort of, one thing that documentary and a lot of different film projects, give the end user the chance to do is sort of live vicariously through someone and empathize with someone that you wouldn't normally empathize with, not because you think they're so different or for any xenophobic reasons, but yeah. I mean, if you don't know someone's story, if you don't know what they're going through, how can you?
Yeah. So in some ways, the filmmaker kind of fills the role of I don't know if you've seen My Hero Academia, but there's a big bad guy in there who gives other people superpowers, right? And the ability to give other people power and inspiration and action to awaken in them what's already there, so that they do uncommon good, right? Because when we're talking about superheroes, we're not talking about just like the person who is nice and doesn't cause trouble. We're talking about how going out there and doing uncommon good. And I think that film, and especially this is where I think representation in film is very important. Because it has the capacity to awaken those kind of things in people, because really the biggest power you can have is the power over the mind, which is why from communist China to Nazi Germany, controlling media has always been important. Media has done a lot to radicalize people's opinions rather than radicalizing their goodness,
yeah, there's a lot of stake put into feelings and beliefs without action.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of commodification now. There always has been of beliefs and things like that. I don't know, creating me as far as my identity, I don't know if I get my identity from films, but I do feel like a lot of my experiences have been shaped from films, and I was kind of raised by the television, so I think a lot of
Yeah.
Some of my first entry points to different people groups and things like that have been through things I've experienced, whether it's on TV or in film.
Exactly.
Um, so I think film is very important that way, especially if you're telling a story that's a lot of people might not have a lot of experience with, or representing a group that doesn't have a lot of representation. Yeah, I think the stakes they can certainly feel high. I think they felt kind of high in our film.
Yeah.
I just tried to make our actors feel as comfortable as possible, and tell the best story I could, given the amazing script that I was given.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, about the why the stakes kind of felt high for I'm having an affair with my wife?
Because I think the script didn't really shy away from authenticity or trying to be authentic.
Are you talking about the racist dinner scene?
There's a racist dinner scene, and there are little details, right? So the script doesn't shy away from being authentic, and it's short stories about a black woman and an Asian male. I am one of those things. So there's part of the relationship that I just had I had to defer to other people when I said, is this should it be this way? Okay, fine, that sort of thing. And at a certain point, you just have to do certain things like that, but always with respect. And I hope it comes across that we are really respectful of this culture that we're trying to represent in this fictionalized relationship. As far as on Black side, there's a scene at the very beginning, couples in bed, they're waking up, sort of setting the tone, your first impression of this couple. And I remember on set, our actor says, "I bought a bonnet. Like, you want me to wear a bonnet?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. A bonnet, a hair." Because they cover their hair and they sleep. It's something we all do.
Yes.
If you have a lot of hair, if you take care of it, you sleep with a bonnet. But and now your viewers can go back and look at all of the representation they've seen, whether it's shows. How many bonnets have you seen? Black women sleep with bonnets every single night of their lives.
Does she have one in the first scene?
She has one in the film, yeah. And it was something we talked about. It was definitely a discussion.
Oh man.
Yeah, and you see them more now in film, but growing up, I never saw them.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna need to pay more attention to can you tell us more about other little details about like that kind of brought out the thing, because I was not able to be there for the filming, and it's for those of you who are just kind of chiming in, Sam and I wrote a script that I submitted to Samantha's publishing company, and Samantha. And I was Samantha very kindly allowed me to be a part of a lot of additional parts that usually screenwriters don't get to be a part of. So I also got to be involved with the casting, and to meet, it's a different experience when you meet professional actors who are going to bring your characters that you wrote in your head to life. That is an experience that I cannot possibly explain to anyone. It's like you feel like you're a fangirl over something that doesn't exist, and it was very, very exciting. So you talk, Sam, but I always kind of go back to the story of Whoopi Goldberg when she was a little girl, and I just watched Star Trek last night with Whoopi Goldberg in it, and I was crying when I remembered this story. But Whoopi Goldberg as a little girl, seeing Uhura on Star Trek on the screen and being so overwhelmed and surprised at what she was seeing, and she ran into the kitchen. She said, "Daddy, Daddy, there's a black lady on TV and she ain't no maid." And just the how much it means to to be able to see yourself as somebody that matters and not as somebody who's in the scene, in the sidelines, somebody who's a maid, somebody who's the background.
Yeah, it definitely does matter. I think we should definitely do a better job of raising our kids to believe that they can be anything, or to aim for dreams that don't have but they to aim to put themselves in spaces that they don't see themselves in, because someone has to always go first.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And so how do we create, and so kind of like wanted to get into the nitty gritty of these processes a little more. I want to hear more about stuff like that you just mentioned, the like, the wearing a bonnet like before going to bed and stuff like that. How do we create these authentic spaces that open up these opportunities to help inspire people and let people see themselves and let people dream? How do we, like, what's the nitty gritty of like that kind of creation process?
Part of it comes writing what you know and filming what you know. Like, we had the actress there, and that thought had been in my mind before, but I mean, like I didn't have the wardrobe go out. Who the person who did our wardrobe in the film is also a Black woman, so um, I didn't have her go out and buy a bonnet, but I could have.
Yeah.
Um, so I think a lot of it is just being familiar with those experiences. Depending on what you're filming, a lot of different filmmakers do a lot of research. I didn't necessarily for this film.
I think also, I think that kind of brings up the point too of why it's so important to have, own voices creators both in front of and behind the screen. Seed and Spark, when we were filming with them, and again for folks at home, Seed and Spark is this like diversity friendly Kickstarter platform basically, or they're supposed to be. I'm not going to crap on them because we were able to crowdfund on there. However, when we were doing some of the forums with them, it became kind of clear that it was kind of they specifically said like their focus was on putting diversity in front of the camera, right? Like having Black actors and so forth. And there was a big discussion during one of these forum discussions of, no, that's not like, especially like, I remember a particular young Black male filmmaker there who was like very frustrated by this because he was looking at their list of executives and seeing that all like out of 40 employees at their company, and they're talking about diversity and pushing diversity on culture, out of 40 employees at their company, one of them was not white. And so it's like very hypocritical, like you're gonna like try to push diversity only in front of the camera, only in front of what you see. But how are you gonna tell other people's stories then? And that's a big issue. Like, so I am not Black, and I wrote this script. I think it would have been not very smart if I had wanted to like try and go out here and film this by myself and not have an authentic behind the screen experience,
Yeah.
like behind the screen experience. I am mixed, and that's why the film kind of is about a mixed race relationship, because it calls up things that I know from tensions that happen in mixed race relationships. But I'm also not a Korean man, and so again, I know that you all took the effort also of checking with Will, our actor for Sungmin. It's like, how do we make this?
I worried about putting too much on him for as far as that. He helped out so much. He was so perfect as far as language and things like that when our actress was really struggling. And
it was definitely easier for me to like write to that experience because I like was surrounded by Korean culture growing up in the particular setting I was growing up in. But that again, you can't know filmmakers an island, and you can't. It's like you said, if you write what you know, well, what if you don't know? Then you.
So that's a big thing. Yeah. I know you're. So I'm very much into reading sci-fi fantasy when I have a chance, and there's a lot of discussions. I stay away from Twitter, but I know that there's been a lot of controversy about some popular authors in their representation of other races in their books, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And just like subtle things, nothing like really overtly terrible, even though, Twitter blows everything out of proportion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some fantasy series kind of implying that dreadlocks were dirty.
Yeah.
Like some characters had demons in their dreadlocks. It was just part of the world building, but it kind of, and it was a white character too, so it was a bit weird. But I maintain that absolutely tell diverse stories.
Yeah, you're not saying like people only have to write exactly their color and their experience and everything else like that, because then the people in power never will open any doors.
not necessarily never open any doors, but there are so many avenues to representation, and why should it be uh, all on filmmakers of color to tell those stories? Like, why should we have to bear the brunt of it? I mean, I should be able to film some white people if I want to, and not feel bad about it. Quite frankly, I mean, that's just the way we. I mean, that's
that's the
we're
extreme
not there
version
yet.
of it. Yeah.
We're really not there yet as far as we've all got to shoulder this.
Part of it too is like talking about who is your. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's something we all need to work towards. Yeah. We need to work together and with humbleness. So, be prepared to receive feedback. I hope no one has any issues with the Korean racist scene in our book, in our film. But if that happens, I'll just say you're entitled to feel that way. I understand, and I'll keep it moving.
Yeah, I felt that scene was more anti-black racist, made me more anxious writing that scene. So we're specifically talking about a scene where they meet the parents, and the parents are subtly racist against the young black woman, but there is some maybe not internalized, but ally racism on the part of the wife towards the husband. The husband feels that way, and the wife doesn't feel that way, and because it's a thing. Like, ally racism is a thing, which I think the best example of it is, of course, the extreme example in Get Out, where the wife, right, the white girlfriend is like defending him from the cops, but that's only like then she's gonna like go home and like sell him to her parents, right? Like that's an extreme like imaginary concept, but I mean it is true, and I think that's kind of what was experienced with Seed and Spark, was like this mild ally racism that like, oh, we support diversity and we support black people in film, but in front of the camera, not behind the camera. And then the actual support that we got from them for other films that were had predominantly white audiences, but it was like an LGBT thing, they got like all kinds of extra like support and add-ons, and they weren't super excited about a pro-marriage film. No. And that attitude, again, I'm not saying that anything bad about them. They do a lot of good work, but there's also a lot of like virtue signaling that happens. And that's what I mean by ally racism.
That's the world we live in, though.
Yeah, exactly. And it's where it's something that I know I've been guilty of, and just hope to never do, and hope people will be patient with me and gently call me out if I do it. But it's the bad allieness, and so that's what I mean by ally racism. So when we're talking about this scene, we're talking about this kind of, it's got these kind of complex and uncomfortable undertones.
It's meant to make you feel uncomfortable, so if it does that, I guess.
But wow. I was so happy, and because that was the scene that I was most worried about, like, okay, maybe that needs to be taken out. But like, your husband thought that was the funniest scene in the film.
He's also a troll, so he likes to see anyone uncomfortable.
Yeah. And we got that response from a lot of people. Like, a lot of people thought that was really funny, because humor is supposed to...
We know we're very well in table reads.
Yeah. So, and that was the one that I was like, maybe I got to get rid of that. I hope Sam will tell me or fix it or get rid of it if it's, and I also didn't want it to be like a triggering thing, because that is a triggering experience. Like, that's a really, like, I know Asian people who are racist against black people. That's a thing that I have seen and experienced frequently, and
They're also true.
Yeah, and that I have a lot of experience with. So that's kind of where that was coming from, and so that's what I was worried about. I wasn't worried about the other way, about the Asian experience being offended. I was really worried about the other experience. So it's encouraging to me that you're worried about the other direction. I think that's
the thing. Like, you feel very comfortable offending your community and making them feel uncomfortable, because discomfort sometimes facilitates growth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when it's not your community, when you feel outside, you're very, very careful about, how can I approach this? I don't want to offend. I want to make sure that they know where I'm coming from.
But I think one thing also that was kind of different about this production is because sometimes productions, like actors, it's kind of like you do what you're told. But I think a small production has the power that the cast informs the crew and so forth. Um, you want to talk a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit more about that?
we were very tight, very small group, very tight group, very confident people, all amazing, all going on to do more amazing things. Yeah.
What other kind of little details did you work in that, or like as you were going along the story? I want to hear more Bonnet stories, basically.
I
Um,
think that was the only one.
but like things like that, or were there any things that you specifically were like talking to Will about that you were like concerned about that he commented or didn't comment on?
um, I was very concerned about the production design of the house that we rented for
Oh yeah.
for the dinner scene. We ended up not being able to do much to it. Um, I don't want to say anything about the guy. That was a very stressful experience working with that property owner. We used him for some other stuff as well, so that was like one of my least favorite experiences. I won't name drop here, but if you're in Cleveland film, I'll tell you not to work with him. Um, yeah, so we didn't. It was kept pretty vague. We didn't do too much, redecorating. I think it looks like a generic house. Um, but that was one thing that I ended up thinking a lot about and just didn't have any frame of reference for. And our production designer didn't really have much frame of reference for it either.
I think the bigger mistake though would have been going the other direction though, and like so because I think the worst thing that happens to Asian Americans in both film and in like social life is becomes this like kung fu dojo stereotype, right? So a lot of times like in things
Oh
like
yeah, with the crazy everything fake and weird sayings
yeah,
everywhere.
so in things like set design, costume design, things like that, a lot of times a exoticness gets played up, and for Asian Americans, that's not their experience. That's not
Yeah,
our
especially
experience.
yeah.
My house is my parents' house is played up like that in some ways, in some areas, because my grandmother, this is a Japanese woman, was an antique collector with my grandfather, and so we have a lot of these like kind of odd, exotic, like over the top statues and things like that. But that's not the normal experience for a lot of Asian Americans. However, that doesn't mean that those don't exist. Especially a lot of Chinese Americans did, especially a long time ago, used to have a lot of different decorations. So I think it would have been worse if to make that mistake the other way, if you have like a hyper decorated, like some Chinese food restaurants try to
Oh yeah.
decorate in
No.
order to try to I think it being kind of generic and toned down kind of works because a lot of spaces tend to be very minimalistic.
Yeah, being careful matters, but also I think we've got to give people the benefit of the doubt when they're being careful,
Yeah.
if they still make mistakes. I think a lot of,
Oh, cancel
I
culture
think
is
people of
a
color in
disease.
particular, there's sometimes a lot of some real outrage. Most of it's fake. Most of it's over stuff that doesn't matter. Like if it's in a fantasy book, that's if it's not overtly racist, like certainly point it out. But there's no need to send mobs after people for trying to tell a story that includes your community.
Yeah, and you see that also with gender stuff as well. Yeah, it's good to get angry sometimes, but what are we getting angry about? Because there are real women who are being taken as slaves and, like in the military, sexually assaulted and told that they, belong to their sergeant or whatever. There are real places where, minor sexual harassment becomes, is, a cover up for something more serious, where things like that people think are innocent, like staring or other things like that, are actually covering up or leading to much more serious things. There are very serious situations in the world, even from microaggressions on up. But how are we, what, where are we directing the force of our anger, and when is it useful? But I think, like you said several years ago to me, that has always stuck with me. It's especially stuck with me through some of this military stuff where I've gotten in trouble for being angry. Just the idea that, we should have a space to be allowed to be angry. And
Yeah.
so, and I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little more about how you talked about, like, because you talked to me about, like, people getting, especially women of color, often being shot down, because anger is, like, looked on as a bad thing or like a not allowed thing. But
What do you mean as far as like being like in the workplace?
at all, just the idea that people shouldn't be angry. And what you talked to me about at that time was
Well,
like,
I mean, I feel like talk about like mixed relationships. My husband is mixed, and I sometimes feel like we come from very different cultures. Um, we talked about this on other podcasts we've been on, but I feel like my family's from New York, and I grew up with people like shouting at each other, like actually shouting at each other, not mad at each other. That's just how they talk to each other. I don't know if it's a city thing, you're sort of talking over the train. I don't know what's going on, but I remember, because I grew up in Virginia, just like hearing them and being like, whoa, they sound crazy. But I mean, at the same time, I know I talk to people and they're like, whoa, you're upset right now. I'm just like, no, I'm talking at you. I'm talking at you passionately, maybe, but I'm not angry. You'll know when I'm angry, kind of thing. So there's a lot of I don't even remember what I don't even know here. Oh, you said about anger. I know in the workplace in general, Black women a lot of the times are perceived as being angry. We're perceived as our demeanor is perceived as being aggressive, and I think that's an extension of Black people being threatening,
mm,
so that being our de facto state.
yeah,
People being a little bit afraid of us all the time,
yeah,
and I think that's what that is stemming from sometimes. Um, I work mostly remote now, so I can just turn my camera off when I'm upset at someone,
yeah.
so they can't tell when I'm really angry.
So they don't know.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking about that, and at that time, I felt like, no, being angry is like scary, and I don't like it when people are angry, which was hypocritical because I have always been such an angry person. But thinking about that over the years, it's been like the fear of righteous anger and how do we properly use anger. I think honestly the best. So I was not into K-pop when I wrote the script. I am now.
You're
I listen to a lot of K-pop now, which is embarrassing because I think that it's girly, but it's not. That's a stereotype also. But there's this particular song I like that is this angry screaming song, angry rap yelling song, that is about anger, and I think it's the best commentary on like well used or poorly used anger, and it's UG by or Uk by BTS.
okay.
It's in Korean.
How is your Korean? Is like I know Brian. I don't know how good Brian's is, but how is yours?
Nope, I have to have it all translated and checked, and I read it many times and I've listened to it many times. I have no Korean. I can count in Korean. So I love this song though because it's in response to a lot of mob canceling stuff that got some K-pop artists to kill themselves a couple of years ago. And it's in response to that, the misplaced anger, and they sing about, they really rap angry about, I like angry K-pop, that's what I like. They rap angry about how this misplaced anger got someone killed. Like, anger is good and useful and can cause social change, but what's happening when you're wasting your anger? And they kind of compare them to, like, ineffectual, random idiots beating on drums. And they have drum sounds in there that match with that and everything else like that. But the idea that, and it's really kind of about things like cancel culture, like the what are we getting angry about? Kind of like you said, like having grace. It's like there is a place to get angry, and we can use anger. And I think anger has a lot of power. But what if we are just kind of throwing it everywhere? And the song specifically talks about how like your anger has no meaning now because you're angry about everything.
Yeah, you'll rebel to anything. I think, yeah, as far as this religious, very religious notion of righteous indignation, it's a very religious term.
Mm.
I think, I'm not sure most humans are capable of it. Or rather, when humans are angry, I think 99% of the time it is not righteous.
I think that's a
So,
slightly different position than you would have had 4 or 5 years ago. That's interesting.
um, maybe I'll qualify that. As far as being angry with other people,
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
um, I think as far as wanting to hurt people, which is where it really comes in on the internet,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it's pretty bad. I don't think people learn by having their livelihoods affected.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that has the impact that people think it does.
Exactly. It does really has no change. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like Disney firing that girl for refusing to put pronouns in her Twitter bio.
Oh gosh.
That I don't think that that's going to make her more likely to ever do that ever in the
Yeah.
future. And if she did, then that would kind of make her a weak woman. It's like they want strong female characters, but they don't want strong independent women in real life who have their own opinions. You know,
Yeah.
if
Well,
you
I mean, like, yeah, it's so weird. So this is an issue of like the system, the tail wagging the dog, like the system determining the individual behavior.
mm-hmm.
Um, because I like to just keep up on skills for like work and things like that, and I'm actually thinking about launching a YouTube channel myself. So I was taking a course on UX design.
Yeah.
Um,
What is UX
yeah,
design?
so it's user experience
Oh, okay.
design, and it's actually offered by Google through Coursera. And basically, they're one of their principles is like equity in design and like accessibility with equity. And they're talking about how like basically the having your platform make sure you can, if you don't include uh, a place for people to identify their pronouns, your app is not equitable, like even if it's like for ordering pizza or something,
Yeah.
like
And that's actually like speaking as someone with severe gender dysphoria, I can say that that's actually extremely triggering. And you're forcing people over and over again to have to identify, have to say what their pronoun is, have to say, you know,
yeah, how public is this, how my
you're
see
reminding them over, like you're reminding us over and over again that we have a different body than how we feel, or we have this or that. Like that's actually not like maybe some like I know that all the public trans activists like that, but in real life, that's so painful to just drag that out over and over again. And a lot of the community, especially the allies, are so hurtful to trans people with the like making you, because a lot of trans people just want to be and have the other gender, and they just want
yeah,
to be quiet about it and just have it, and that's it.
yeah,
And so when you're forcing it to be out over and over and over again, I mean, that is a form of re traumatization. And they can pretend that that's not, and they can say, no, we're making sure it's inclusive. I know from personal experience that is extremely painful. I'm in charge of the Headwallers column for the Wilderness Medicine Society, so I'm pretty involved in the Wilderness Medicine Society on a national scale here. And that's a direction that's come up in conferences, and on every conference survey I make sure to emphasize I have severe gender dysphoria and I cannot handle being forced to identify. I cannot. Like, don't do that to me, please. Just because I want to have a place where like it can be safe for everyone. It's like forcing people to identify with safe spaces. Also forcing people to have a pledge of allegiance and say this place is safe or not. That by de facto creates unsafe spaces, right? Rather than the
you
default.
think like is this place not safe, like yeah,
Exactly. Rather than the default should be that all places are safe and everyone can be, treated with kindness. And then, then what about people who have social disorders and have so much trouble communicating and identifying with all these like difficult little nuances that now everyone has to keep up with? That to me is the opposite of, using, either the user experience or what you create or film, rather than using those things to create heroes and good people. What we're doing is creating paranoid, stressed out, unhappy people who feel like they can never be themselves anywhere because they always have to wear 100 million labels. And I think that's the difference between what I kind of call fake diversity and, like real, authentic, like having people in diversity. If it's like, okay, we have to I have to carry all these labels on me all the time. I have to be, hyper aware of this situation. I have to then be careful about everyone else's labels constantly. It's different than I care about other people and therefore I want to make them comfortable from wherever they come from. I want to learn about them, and it's more them focused instead of me focused. Whereas the kind of hyper aware labeling becomes very me focused. And I think it seems like a very slight distinction, but it is the difference between like the token black person in film and an actual like real human performance. I think. I could be wrong. You can correct me on that for sure.
So I think you tied it. You have to explain again how that is, like, the identity is tied to tokenism. You mean just people feeling like, okay, we got one in there. It doesn't matter what he looks like or dresses like or, his own experience. He's in there and we won. Good job, guys. That kind of thing.
Exactly. Because it's like self-protecting. It's corporations protecting themselves and virtue signaling. I think a big example of this is on YouTube. And I guess it gets back to the virtue signaling, that these systems are creating stressed out and afraid people, paranoid people who, running around have to worry about being re-triggered, running around having to worry about being re-traumatized. And obviously the last couple political cycles here in the US have not been helpful with that either. But because there has been real danger that people have to worry about. But when, for example, and I'm jumping all over the place, but when, for example, going back to like, okay, you have to have pronoun identification in your user experience design. You have to check these blocks when you're creating your film. Making everything into a checklist.
Bechdel test.
Yeah.
We were pretty proud of passing the Bechdel test and all that stuff too, though.
And that's good. It's good to use it to
talking about are like systems to encourage and facilitate diversity and adequate representation of women. So like the Bechdel test is really a bare minimum. Like basically, I don't even know what it is. It's basically two women talking to each other about something that's not a man.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it, or is there something else?
Yeah, exactly. Although technically lesbian porn always passes the Bechdel test as well. So that's why those kind of things are not not only are they not enough, but hyper focusing on these on these legalistic checklists rather than coming from a place of love and interest and compassion for human beings and human stories.
Wanting to tell a story
ends up creating cancel culture. I mean, it creates a society of people who always have to walk on edge because they're afraid that perfect love casts out fear. And if you love someone, you're going to figure it out. You're going to make your mistakes. You're going to get better. And you're going to have humility like you talked about. And you're going to work towards it. But if you are actually just afraid of protecting yourself and there's this, and afraid of preserving your own identity and making sure that you have the right labels to be safe, making sure you know everybody else's labels so that you can say the right thing this way. You know what I mean? There's a different kind of society that's not the society we wanted to create. And I think talking about the theme of creating societies and heroes in film,
like anything, and these aren't laws. These are societal laws. I mean, at a certain point, like these things you get canceled over. Well,
and they become laws in New York.
They're mores. They're cultural mores.
Well, but in New York, in New York City, if you fail to identify someone by the correct pronoun, you can face real legal action now.
I knew that was the case in Canada. I didn't know that was the case in New York.
And it's not the case in like Quebec and certain places in Canada. And a lot of times the U.S. is more extreme in certain areas than the other areas. So so it's like we is this a society really of equity and diversity that we're creating, or are we fracturing ourselves more with these
No,
like
I think
forced identifications?
yeah, I think free speech should be protected. Full stop.
That was very very end. Yeah, very full stop. I like how I just like you were very blunt with how you put that.
Yeah, I think you got to protect free speech. It's not to say that I don't. I call people what they want to be called. I try and remember.
Hmm.
I'm kind of getting old. I feel like my memory was like this really sharp, you know, thing, and now I think it's kind of fading. So like, you know, I don't think I've misgendered someone in a very long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I make an effort to call people what they want to be called, which I know is controversial in and of itself for some people. It's really not for me.
Yeah.
But as far as free speech, like I don't know what it accomplishes. I don't understand in my brain. This is INTP logical brain. I don't understand what it accomplishes to have someone to force someone to call you something that is not changing what's inside their brain. That's not making the world safer for you at all.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's like if and not I'm gonna use a comparison, but not these things are not at all the same. Not even if I'm meeting someone and they want to call me the N word,
Whoa. Yeah, that's not at
it's
all the
against
same.
the law for them to call me the N word. Well, do they feel differently about me because they could legally go to jail for that? No, the world is not safer. They do not feel better about me for legally not being able to call me that. And you know, I'd rather know what you believe. I'd rather know how you feel about me, and that's gonna better inform my decisions going forward.
I think it kind of brings up almost a side question of um, when you're choosing legal protected groups, because it is interesting that it's illegal to call people by the wrong pronoun, but there's nowhere in the country where like calling someone the N word is illegal, which is we can all agree is a much more like
I didn't.
aggressive.
There's places I could legally beat the crap out of you for it.
That's, yeah.
So they're fighting for it. That's the closest we get. Yeah. So it's the closest we get. Basically saying you can say what you want, but there are consequences, essentially.
Yeah, but that's what's astounding is that it's like when we're picking our protected groups, it's really about protected groups based on who's in power, and it's not really about if it were really about creating an equitable, diverse society where everybody is represented and has dreams and chances, and we were really going to do it with law, you would think the N word would have been the first thing on the chopping block. So it's like it kind of shows that this is not.
As Dave Chappelle said, did we get leapfrogged in the civil rights Olympics? Is that what happened?
Yes, that's so true, and it. Oh my gosh, that's a horrible. That's a really funny way to put it, but yeah. And this is, I think, where I wrote a long essay to somebody about this the other day, where I feel like people within the LGBT community. I wrote this as a person in the LGBT community, a lot of times appropriating black pain to say, in order to raise a flag for a self, and to say, oh yes, my experience. So the context was it was a black YouTuber talking about his reaction to blackface on a thumbnail of an ally, and how that was in that context entirely inappropriate. And the ally is white, so using blackface like this was just not a
even digitally, it's pretty rough.
It does but in the comments there was a fellow trans person who was writing about how basically writing like, oh yeah, this is how I felt too, this happened to me when he asked if men have the ability to consent if they don't know somebody's genitalia. And I was like, whoa honey, these two are not like, one of these is not like the other. because on the one case, one of these is not like the other, because trans people and everyone in the LGBT community has always been able to pass. There's always been the possibility that you can pass, right? And while, yes, like, I'm not saying that anyone should, that's not, like, an option available to black people. So, like, there's nowhere in the history of the United States where trans people were universally collected as slaves, universally, I mean, I don't have to preach these things I'm preaching to a choir. But this is not these two are not the same. These two are not similar. And that doesn't mean that the suffering of trans people or anyone in the LGBT community doesn't matter. But, when we're talking about we're talking literally in a black space about a problem, a concern that a black YouTuber has brought up, I do not think it is right to, like, come in appropriating and being like, oh yeah, I felt just like that when someone was worried that, they would get raped by me because I have a penis. Which is like, no, that's different. A man does have a right, a cis, I think cis is a hate term, but a cis straight man does have a right to know who he's going to bed with, because everyone has a right to not be penetrated if they don't want it. Everybody. That's not hate. That's a very different situation. And it is like a tendency to, wow, the Dave Chappelle quote is awesome, but it's like, are we really concerned? And it's the same thing Cedar and Spark was doing. It's like, are we really concerned here about diversity and telling people's stories, or are we concerned about being a victim of being the noisiest?
Have more value than others, and I think it's it's just telling what stories you value and what experiences you value and whose professional development you value.
Yes.
I think you were more bothered by the Seed and Spark thing than I was. I was just like, you know what, we're gonna make this, let's move forward.
And I think that's probably a bad thing on my end, is I do the dumb thing where getting angry on other people's behalf who aren't even angry and don't really have a right. I don't really have a right. I remember a really embarrassing moment during our funding where I was getting really heated argument with somebody about before Black Lives Matter became Black Lives Matter, I think. About that concept.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, about police.
We were talking about Black Lives Matter before it was even a hashtag.
Well, I mean, it's true. I got unfriended for, like, talking about the Trayvon Martin case before it came out of the petition. I signed the original freaking petition before, a year before it entered the news cycle. Which doesn't mean anything, but, like, the whole... And I know these are very controversial things, and I know you guys in chat, I know you guys have very different opinions from all of each other. I know we have hyper-conservatives in here. I know we have people on the other end of the spectrum. I know we
we can talk another day about, like, hashtags getting co-opted. Because, I don't know, like, oh my goodness. I have conservative people that I know, talking about, like, oh, look at who runs these organizations. Like, I've been talking about this, like, since I was 10.
Before these organizations. Yeah,
before this organization existed. Like, can you please compartmentalize? Can you have some higher thinking?
Yes. That it's not, that you have to be able to separate the organizations that are taking advantage of a movement for their own financial and political gain, separate those organizations from the actual underpinning ideological needs of a real movement.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
you said it perfectly.
But that was exactly, but to get back to the, like, getting angry when you shouldn't get angry or getting angry on other people.
I don't know what you're talking about as far as our film.
I don't know if you remember, I was embarrassed. I don't think you noticed it or called it out, but I was arguing really aggressive with somebody about, actually it was about, like, police violence and representation. And I was arguing with a young black man who got so annoyed at me, he sent me a picture of his hand.
That's hilarious.
You were included in the thread, and I don't know if you didn't see, because I felt that he was being rude and disrespectful to you. And
I mean, this is why I'm not on Twitter anymore. It's kind of the way of the world there. That's sick.
It's a waste of time over there on Twitter. But that was a good lesson for me about how hard you go, and understanding, because also understanding that, and I wasn't.
People are
I
not
yeah, I
monoliths.
wasn't intentionally putting anyone in a monolith, but I assumed from the way he was talking that he was a racist white man. And I still disagree with what he thought, but I went about it the wrong way. You know, it was very embarrassing. I've been very embarrassed by myself over the years. Um, so it kind of gets back to that whole thing of what are we doing? How are we placing our thoughts? And it's a messy world trying to make things that make things better for people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think particularly if you are not the people in context, like in my case, you know, having to listen, I really need to listen and be careful and talk less. Right. You know, gotta be careful. But at the same time, you know, we gotta make things. Somebody's gotta make them. And in real life, my real life heroes, like the people who have influenced me throughout my life, and then especially now here at the end, the like what am I
The
going
end
to
of what?
well, the end with like everything that's going on with the military.
Yeah.
You know, here at the end of, I guess I feel like my life is over. I guess it's not
Yeah,
technically
yeah, it
over.
sounded very morbid. I was
No,
like, what's going
I'm
on?
technically still alive.
Yeah, you're.
But those people haven't been limited to like one kind of person. So in some ways, it'd be really dishonest to my experience. And this is why I think that people who are not own voices creators should still get up and create stuff. And you know why I think that you should film Koreans if you want, and so forth. Because the people, it would be dishonest to my experience and to the reality of the world if I had everyone be like one color or one kind of thing. Because then it's like, what about all of the women in my church who like helped me out and went on adventures with me and did stuff? What about the women in my dance team who like were the only people who were like kind of encouraging when I was in Korea? What about, you know, like my best friend in college who like ran around and had adventures with me and threw flip flops and like who influenced my growth permanently? What about the only person who put up with me in high school because I was like a little monster? Like all those people were black. So if I'm creating a world in which there are no black people, that would
What's
be
going on?
dishonest also. You know, so it's like we have, to me it's like I've always felt like if I'm challenged on something, like why are you writing a character that you don't know, it's important for me to be open to like, okay, how can we
The
fix
world is
it?
filled with these types of people, like, and
Yeah.
that should be stopped. Like, this is, I mean, really, we should seek, and this can get really legalistic, but I mean, the worlds we create should look like the world outside.
Hmm.
And we have to keep, I mean, like, I live in Northeast Ohio right now, and not even, I said Cleveland, but I don't really live in Cleveland. I live in, where I lived before, there were like no black people around. So
Yeah.
some people, they don't see black people. You know what? And you know what? That's okay. I think your story is going to be a bit flat, but maybe it's not, you know? Um, Maybe it's going to be wonderful, you know?
But where it becomes a problem is when people who have that experience and have grown up all in one monolithic space then don't want to or feel threatened by creations of other experiences coming in. Like they're, you know, like,
Yeah,
oh,
they feel
why
like
do I
it's,
have to have black superheroes in Marvel or whatever? Because my
yeah,
life is all white and there's only white people in my life. And it's kind of like, well, I'm sorry that that's your existence. That's not the existence of
I don't
90% of
watch
the
it,
planet.
you know? I don't even, don't, don't watch it. You want to, like, you can't empathize with people who don't look like you, i.e. a sociopath. And that was, you know, that's, I mean, that's my line. Like for years, for your listeners, Hollywood's official line was like that. You know, we can't tell these stories because people won't empathize with people who don't look like them, and that is a definition of a sociopath.
Yep.
The people who can't empathize. Hollywood thinks white people are sociopaths. Full stop. That was their official line for decades,
And they're
and it's
wrong. I mean, Black Panther made so much money.
no, of course it's not the case. We know it's not the
Yeah,
case.
exactly. They were
I
wrong
mean, even
financially.
that little, you know, white town in Northeast Ohio, you know, um, I think there are some uncomfortable experiences, but I think there's a lot of love and there's a lot of, um, you know, people who, you know, regardless of their exposure, are fully able to empathize with other human beings that don't look like them.
Yes. Yeah, it was a real huge market miscalculation. Like not understanding that like people want good stories. That's it. You keep saying full stop during conversation. That's a good place for like a full stop. People want good stories, and that's what they're inspired by. And people don't really. People will spend money, a lot of money, for good stories. And I think that's where now the marketing model, like the marketing Mongols up at the top have realized, oh, diversity works. So let me check all these boxes, and it becomes this money game again, because it's like they've made their financial calculations, and it's like, yeah, but now you're going to lose money again because people don't want fake stories. People want good
People want
stories.
authenticity. People don't want corniness.
Yeah.
They don't want, the old retired thing with a new face.
Yeah. It's very true. So kind of to close out, because I know you've got stuff to do and you have work and stuff, and because I am tired and hurting, I wanted to kind of ask or hear a little bit more from you about. Because we've talked about all these concepts of how how to create societally impactful stories and representation, and why the hero narrative in some ways comes from what we see and what we watch. But at the same time, there's also the possibility, we talk about like doing practical good on this channel a lot. There's also the possibility of thinking about how we can be kind of a hero in some ways to other creators. And one of the things that I think is just phenomenal about you is you've always been that kind of person who wants to like lift other people up. You were like lifting up Stacy and lifting up different people within the Ohio community when we were talking about like why this or that person for film. I was always a little bit more calculating, like, well, I think this will work for such and such, benefit to the film reason, or this and this, like, ideological, like, it needs to fit this particular ideological bent. Like, we had the conversation about the police officers for that reason. But, like, you were kind of like, these nice people want to help, and I want to help these nice people. I want to be nice.
We're in a tight market, and there's a lot of really talented people, but everyone's got a job. No one's doing film full time. We're just not in that type of market. Even the most talented people, like the most talented DPs, they're shooting corporate stuff. They have jobs. We're not Atlanta. We're not LA, where people just, they wait around to get their little acting gig,
So in some ways, you're more practical, but in another way, like the attitude you went about it was just really like loving and compassionate. And, like, how can I lift this other person up? How can I help them tell their story? This person wants to be in a film. How can I get them in here? How can I, especially
for better or worse?
Yeah,
I didn't want to tear my hair out sometimes on set, but I think we came out with an overall pretty strong product.
That's true. There were some people that you were real nice to that I know were difficult for you. But it's like you wanted to, and I think that attitude of, heroism and kindness, because I think the best thing you can do for somebody else is to help them to tell their story, or help them get a spotlight, or help them be part of a thing. So since that's kind of your gift, I think, in a lot of ways,
lifting people up, that's so sweet.
I think so. I think that you were always, even when there were things where I was pretty insistent on, like, okay, it has. I felt like, even though I did not have as much, I was just a screenwriter, and I didn't have as much a right to be as part of stuff, you were always very much, like, focused on, like, making sure that I had a say, or, like, was included and things like that. I hope that didn't backfire on you. I hope I didn't, like, overreach as a result. But, like, for everyone, and not everyone's like that. A lot of people will draw those lines across racial, socioeconomic, whatever barriers, and be like, well, I'll support this kind of person. Not going to support all kinds of people. And you are so kind and, like, lifting, right? And so my question, I know this is a lot of words and not a question. My question is, what are some ways that people can practically do that? What are some organizations, maybe, or groups, or like places where they can lift each other up, if they're interested in film, right? Like where they can help other filmmakers, support other filmmakers.
I am on the board. Sorry, I'm talking right over you. I'm sorry.
No, I should shut up.
I'm on the board of Women in Film Ohio. as a founding member there. We didn't have any women in film chapters in all of Ohio. So just sort of been helping out. Now I'm helping out with their communications. So if you're in Ohio, just search for that. As far if you're, we accept non-women too, and a lot of people don't know that a lot of most of the chapters accept people who don't identify as women. So um, there's women in film. There's a lot of film grant websites. Screen Ops is a big one for women. Um,
Tribeca, I think, still, right? Tribeca's
yeah,
one.
Stage 32 is a great community. It never really took off. Um, IMDb is a good place to network. So people say I've never like slid into anyone's DMs there or like creeped on like who's producing what there, but people use it for that all the time. It's not too
make a lot
expensive.
of
Yeah,
contacts.
yeah.
I always get turned down by those contacts, but hey, I try.
Yeah. Well, you can, you use it and you go, "Ooh, he produced this," and now you look on the website and, "Oh, this is their number. I'm gonna call them up." Um, what else? IMDb. What specifically, like, in what specific aspects of filmmaking?
That I think all of them, and I think that really answered the question. So like where can
Okay.
people find and give support? Like if they want to help other people in film, or they want to learn.
Yeah, if you want to
You know,
crowdfund, if you want to support projects, Seed and Spark still up and running.
yep,
Um,
absolutely. Indiegogo has a significant film section still too as well.
yeah, join your local film commission, and your state most definitely has a film commission. Join, go to their mixers if you want to get into film. They're great places. The one in Ohio, COVID's been really weird, but they throw mixers every season. Um, and they have a job board on their website. So when the big productions come to town, they're looking through those boards. And that's how I've been contacted for some of the bigger productions, like Fast and Furious. Actually, well, like Transformers. Just being on those boards and things like that. Um,
Ooh, sorry, I didn't mention that either.
But
I
at the
didn't know
mixer,
you were
you'll
into
meet people,
Transformers.
and those people need people all the time. Whether it's actors, people. If you're just interested in learning more about like being behind the camera, learning about helping out as an assistant director or a PA. Everyone needs PA for everything.
That's awesome. Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Oh, somebody loves you. People are talking in chat. So just so yeah. In closing, folks, if you want to be like engage more with. I know this is a very heady topic. I know normally we do things like combat tracking or like how to help somebody with a foot fungus or like things like that. I know we normally do like survival type stuff. But kind of fitting in with the superhero channel, how we've been talking about, some of the bigger conceptual and philosophy stuff, like how we've been talking about some of the Japanese culture and other things like that we've been talking about on this channel. I think that a fully realized, like, real life superhero has the ability to understand that nobody's an island, and if you want to make change, you have to understand how change works in society. And so I think understanding film is incredibly important to that. So for those of you listening, both here live and in the on the channel when this goes up, I want you to think about, like, do you understand how change works in society, and think about, just as an exercise, like how you would get involved, like in film and in supporting your, like who, even on the very basic level, like what do you support in film? What do you look for in film? Obviously, a lot of us are looking for relaxation a lot of the time, but also the people who are making that are thinking about their influence on you and the marketing of you. You are an asset for sale. So things to think about and maybe mull over. And I hope that some of this conversation's been helpful to you. There's one more way that you can get help for your film, actually. Anything else that you want to shout out, Sam, or like somewhere where people can find you, learn more about you, follow you? Any more, hot takes about the new YouTube channel you're thinking about putting up, or like?
I'm thinking about doing something more literary, but also that has a high sort of cinematic quality value. So doing the film that way, talk about fantasy. There's a booktube is ginormous, as Jen knows. So like finding a space uh, to talk about things that no one else is talking about is difficult. I have some ideas, but also I know I'm too busy to post like 3 times a week, so that's the thing. I have a website, samanthamani.com. You can find links to some recent stuff. I mean, the film I'm having an affair with my wife is really the main thing that I've been doing. I've got some corporate projects that aren't up there right now, though. Yeah. If you search Instagram for like My Sweet Affair, you'll probably find it.
Oh, that's right. It'll like come right up. There's not a lot of accounts talking about affairs. All right.
Watch this film when it's available. If you see it on Amazon randomly, watch it.
Buy it. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And it's gonna be, well, they'll know when it's available, because the people who are here usually are here every week.
Watch it and review it positively,
Yes.
or not at all.
Say nice things. Oh boy, I'm excited. I'm really, really excited for it. You want to give
Oh.
kisses? You want to give kisses? Kisses.
Aw.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, Sam. Thank you so much, and bye the rest of you folks. I hope that you have a lovely evening. You matter, and you have the chance to change the world wherever you are. And I am so honored to even meet in a tiny way every single one of you. Obviously, Sam, I've actually met you. And I love you. You're awesome. But like just the impact that you have as a human being, anytime you breathe in and out, and anytime you walk on this planet matters. So thank you for being here and spending your time with me. Have a good night. Goodbye.